Quite an introduction. Well, this is weird, guys. We're here in person with each other. Like, let's take a moment to really appreciate that. Because nothing's making sense in 2020, and the universe is trying to make it seem like none of us are going to live forever. Particularly if they take away healthcare. If you're looking for a face to put towards the whole issue of Obamacare, use this face right here. Because before Obamacare, no joke, I had no health insurance for 20 years. My health plan was don't get sick. And so I didn't. Except one time I ended up in the hospital. Not the emergency room. It was a pre-scheduled visit. I was in a waiting room. And I know you're thinking right now, you're like, oh, you can't hear any more of the story until you know why was I there at the hospital. But I would ask you just please put that question out of your minds. Just try not to think about it, because if you do, then you will be in the exact same headspace that I was in, sitting in the lobby, the waiting room of that hospital, trying not to think about why I was there. And this is the early 2000s, and it's a time in my life when I was very proud of the fact that I didn't own a phone. Nobody else was proud of it. They were just annoyed. And particularly in this moment, I was annoyed as myself because there was nothing to distract myself from the reason that I was there. So while everybody else in this waiting room was pouring into their little phones, I was forced to watch the television up on the wall in the corner. Because this was a weekday, and because it was the middle of the day, what was playing up there was a soap opera. And like every American, I feel I can have opinions about things that I've never actually indulged. So I hate soap operas. I'm better than them. We all are. But the arc of the history of the universe has bent itself towards this moment where at last I will be forced to watch a soap opera. So I cross my arms over my chest, sit back in the chair, and I look up, and maybe when you're considering your own mortality in the waiting room of a hospital, everything has some sort of extended metaphorical meaning. But the name of this soap opera was One Life to Live. So I'm like, all right, teach me. And I begin to watch. And people, I think it's important that when we are wrong about something, just come out and admit it. Because this soap opera, oh my God. I'm not being facetious. I'm not saying it was so bad, therefore it was good. It was incredible. It was mind-bending. I'm going to tell you the plot very briefly. Basically, on this soap opera, you have a soap opera. And the soap opera on the soap opera has been canceled. And there's a fan club, and they are so upset that they decide they're going to do something about the soap opera on the soap opera to keep the soap opera on the soap opera alive. And the demographics of this fan club, I love it. There's just 3 of them, which is perhaps why the soap opera on the soap opera has been canceled. You have a late middle-aged woman. You have a black man who's gay in his 30s. You have a young Asian American woman in her 20s. And the 3 of them all decided to go down to the set of the soap opera, on the soap opera, and take it hostage until they agree to uncancel the soap opera. They make their way down to the set. Somehow they get onto set, but oh no! All the furniture on the set is covered with little dust blankets. There's a janitor sweeping up. They go up to him, they're like, what happened? He's like, oh no, they just wrapped the last scene of the soap opera and it's canceled. And the late middle-aged woman puts her back of her hand to her forehead and faints onto the couch with the aplomb that only an actress who's been fainting on soap operas for decades can do. It's amazing passing out. So amazing that the whole camera goes out of focus for a moment, and then when it comes back into focus, she's still there on the couch, but the dust covers are gone. As it pans out, the dust covers are off the entire set. She's looking around, she's amazed until she realizes, oh my God, I am in the soap opera. On the soap opera. And there's a party going on around her, and she's in a maid's outfit, and everyone's expecting her to hand out hors d'oeuvres. And she's looking like, what is going on? And I'm there being like, I have no idea. This is amazing. Looking around at everybody who's poured into their phones, me thinking, you're missing out on your lives. And then I am called to go and have my appointment. I'm like, no, I don't. I want to find out what's happening on this soap opera so much more than I want to find out what's happening with my testicles. And the only reason that I'm at all curious about my testicles is because I have a girlfriend, okay? And we were lying in bed, and you know how women are. You're trying to read. You're trying to go through the stock things in the newspaper, as we men do. And yes, we call them stock things. And then the fondling begins. And so she's fondling my balls and stops all of a sudden and says, what? And I'm like, that's not a good sign. She's like, there's something hard in there. And she's like, you have to feel this. It's difficult. Feel on in there. And I do, and I can't find it. She's like, keep looking, keep looking, keep looking. And like, once you really start examining, well, anyone's testicles really, but your own, you know, are the ones I care about the most. It's strange the amount of decisions that either evolution or intelligent design made to finally come up with this being the safest way to carry the seed, you know? And it's like putting your hand into a fruit salad bowl, you know what I mean? And closing your eyes and looking for a raisin somewhere in there. And that's a fruit salad. It's like covered with a thin sack of skin, and it's attached to your penis. It's exactly what, it's uncomfortable until I find it, and I'm like, oh my God, there it is, and it's hard, and so that means some days after that, I am sitting now in the waiting room of a free health clinic in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, with a whole bunch of other people whose life decisions have led them to be sitting in the waiting room of a free health clinic in Williamsburg. And if I perhaps did not have the self-confidence that I have, I would have at that moment been forced to question my own life decisions that have led me here to a free clinic in Williamsburg. And I did not question my decisions. I did question whether I should be questioning my life decisions that have led me here to this room with all these other people who at the very least are questioning whether they should be questioning their own life decisions. And so I'm led to a little examination room. Maybe you guys have been, I hadn't been to a hospital, anything for so many years, you know? And I go sitting there, I'm like, wow, somebody designed this room. It's nothing remarkable. Someone chose this dull gray-blue paint. Someone decided on what would be the one piece of art in here. The only thing to look at is a framed picture, I'm not kidding, of throat cancer. Like, you know? Like, what store even do you go into where you're like, here's like the feel-good kitten on the branch, here's the bands, here's the Monets. That corner that's dark, that's just the feel-bad section. You'll find the throat cancer pictures in there. And I don't know why throat cancer's up on the wall. I assume it's because if I am diagnosed with testicular cancer, I can think like, well, at least it's not that, you know? Which implies, I suppose, that there must be another examination room in this building with a picture of testicular cancer on the wall, and that's where they bring the people who think they've got throat cancer. So when then they're positively identified as having it, they can be like, well, thank God my penis won't look like that. A woman comes into the room. She's in her early 30s, a black woman. She's buxom. She says she's a nurse practitioner. I don't know what a nurse practitioner is, but the meaning of nurse practitioner is anything other than someone who's not a nurse but just practicing. Like, they should change the word, because I lost all confidence when she told me she's a nurse practitioner. I was like, I want a real nurse, you know? And she's like, take off your pants. I'll be right back. She leaves the room, and I know she means my pants and my underwear. There's no way to actually look at the testicles without, but I have like decades of knowing, like, I didn't need Harvey Weinstein or Me Too to know that consent is very important. You know, it's like I ask women if I can ask them if I can ask for consent. Like, I'm really scared about this, and I don't want her to walk in. I've got no clothes on, and she looks at me like I'm an idiot. So I don't drop the pants, the underwear, and the door opens, and she walks in, and she looks at me like I'm an idiot, and she's like, your underwear too? I'm like, oh yeah, right, of course. And I take it off, and I don't know, like, if I would have felt more comfortable if I had been completely naked, but I don't think so, because there's just no way to have any sort of confidence when your pants are just literally around your ankles. And I suppose we've all had that dream where you end up at school and you're naked, right? I didn't have that exactly. I had a variation of that dream when I would grow up, where I'd be at school, I'd show up not naked. I'd be naked except for a T-shirt, you know? So it'd be like the anxiety of being naked at school, and then also the wondering whether anyone's noticed, you know? And then I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, thank goodness that situation will never happen. And so she is putting on the blue latex gloves in front of me, you know, 2 feet away from me, looking me in the eyes, her breasts 1 foot away from me, and then her hand 0 feet away from me, where she is, and I used this phrase before in a more flippant way, but now to use it in a purely technical, medical way, she begins fondling my balls, and she's like, "Where is it?" I'm like, "It's hard to find. You got to keep looking," and it, you know, and it's the whole thing. And she's right there in front of me, and I know this is not a sexual situation, guys. Like, I would be immature if any part of me thought it was. And I'm feeling sort of very self-congratulatory that I'm mature enough to know, like, of course, this has nothing to do with sex. But I do wish that I could stop telling myself that this has nothing to do with sex. In fact, I'm thinking about it so much that it's actually no different than if I were thinking about sex. And you guys have played with like Sony PlayStation controllers, right? You know, the little black, and they've got like a little joystick that comes up. That's about the size and mobility of my penis right now. It's tiny. It's just so small right there. It's really doing its best to let her know that this is not a sexual situation at all. But of course, the longer that she's looking for this thing, and the more that she can't find it, I'm afraid that she's going to start thinking that I've just found a really cheap way to get a nurse who's just practicing at such to fondle my balls. Eventually she's like, okay, that's it. And I don't think she found it. I'm not going to question her. I say yes, because whether she finds it or not, we all know what has to happen next. I have to go and get a sonogram. You would think that would be as easy as me calling up the hospital where I'm supposed to go to get it and making an appointment. No, she's like, they will contact you. Though this is just 10 years ago, they won't contact me by phone. They won't contact me by email. No, I have to wait for a letter to arrive in the mail with my date and time of my next appointment. So every day now I'm just checking the mailbox, wondering if Cancer and I are going to have a second date, wondering if we're going to like each other, whether we're going to do this or not. The date comes, I go to the hospital, I sit in the waiting room, there's the soap opera, and then I'm whisked back into this room to get my sonogram. It's a 65-year-old technician. He dims the lights. He's like, okay, take off your pants. He turns away to do something. I take off my pants. He turns back around. He's like, and the underwear. I'm like, right, take off the underwear. He's like, okay, get up on the bed. You know that bed has got like that sort of like wax, crinkly paper on. Nothing makes you feel more like a piece of meat than getting up on that paper at a doctor's office, and you're afraid to move at all on it because every fidget, every bit of anxiety that is translated and amplified by the crinkling of the paper as you move around on this bed. So I'm very, very still as he then, I don't know what it's really called, but we'll just call it KY jelly. He dips into the KY jelly, this sort of a gel, and sort of starts lathering it onto the inside of my thigh and the outer edge of my testicles, and then takes out what looks like a sex toy. It's a wand by which he will do the sonogram, and then just sort of gently just sort of moving it around there as I'm just looking up at the tiles above me, just trying to think again, like, well, this isn't a sexual situation. This isn't a sexual situation. And he's like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I do theater. And that's all the piece of information he needs to like label me as a liberal progressive guy, because he then starts telling me about himself, about how he's in charge of the union here, how he's going to retire soon, but he doesn't want to retire because he doesn't know who will replace him. Right now he's telling me about another employee who's having all sorts of trouble, and he goes into great detail about what trouble that employee is having. He tells me that for his whole life he has put out a communist newsletter once a month. He was on the student union. He's been arrested 7 different times on City Hall and gone to jail. And I'm going to tell you how long he was talking to me, but I'm holding off because this is the point in the story where I will lose credibility, because you'll think I'm exaggerating. You're like, there's no way he really talked to you for that long. But ladies and gentlemen, an hour and a half, 90 minutes. He is no longer checking me. His arms just come to rest on my thigh. The wand just resting against my testicles. Him going at length on socialism and communism, as me amazed as I'm struggling to keep my eyes open, that like, wow, you can really fall asleep into anything if you could fall asleep to this right now. 90 minutes. He's finally done, right? And so I sort of like get up on one elbow, and as if I'm not really interested, as if this isn't the reason I'm here, I'm like, so how does it look? And he's like, well, a technician, I can't really talk to you about it. And I'm like, dude, I don't say this out loud, but it's on my face. I'm like, dude, you've been talking to me for 90 minutes. Don't get all technical with the rules now. And then he looks at me and says, but it's nothing. You got nothing to worry about. I'm like, oh my God, really? He's like, yes, that bicycle ride home, I was on top of the world. Like, oh my God, I don't have cancer. Did not bother me that I didn't realize that you have to also clean that gel out between your butt cheeks. So that was a very slippery ride on my bicycle back home, but it's fine. I had a new lease on life. And that night, I go to a Christmas party, and I'm telling everybody, I don't have cancer. It's like the end of It's a Wonderful Life. I'm going alive, and I'm like, oh, my God, I've so many lives left to live. And I'm telling this one guy that I'm at the hors d'oeuvre table with about the soap opera I saw, and I said, soap operas, they're amazing. And I tell him the plot, and he's got a smirk on his face. And I'm like, what? He's like, I wrote that. I'm like, what world is this that I live in? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, well, we were canceled. We were canceled. And once we were canceled, the network no longer cared at all what sort of storylines we're going to do. We have a rabid fan base. So we decided we're just going to do shows for our fans, about our fans, shows that they're going to like, shows that we're going to just enjoy doing. And I'm like, oh my God, the universe is such an amazing place. And that's this one moment in time I can look back to where like everything made sense. And I felt that perhaps I'm going to live forever. We'll see, guys. It's a cliffhanger. It's a cliffhanger. Thanks a lot. That's my story.
Martin Dockery, everyone. Oh, my God.